it wasn't until I stopped and tried to walk through how I was going to approach my daughter and break that cycle that I kind of formed a little bit of empathy for, the man out there that I don't know.
Welcome to the Crossing It Off podcast, where each episode we share the stories of individuals that are living out their bucket/life goal lists. I am your host, Roger Williams, and through hearing our guests' adventures, my goal is that you will find encouragement and empowerment to add and cross items off of your list. Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm excited that you're with us today, and I'm going to introduce my guest. His name is Mike Martin, and Mike describes himself as an author, an outdoorsman, a backwoods philosopher, and a father. Mike, thank you so much for being on the show.
Roger, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, this is going to be great. Very sensitive topic and something you crossed off your list. So I appreciate you being here and being vulnerable about it. So what was that item that you crossed off your list?
I think the easiest way to say it is personal redemption, because I made a lot of wrong choices throughout my life, and I had an opportunity where I got to reach back into the past and correct something that needed to be corrected. And I found my estranged daughter.
Wow, that takes a lot of work. What does it mean to be estranged from your daughter first, so we can get that out of the way?
I hadn't seen her in about 8.5 years.
And she was how old when you reached out?
She was 10.
She was 10. And so how did that first go? Had you kept contact with the mother, or was it something that you had to do outside of that relationship? How'd that work for you?
You know what? Between me and the mother, we had gone and split completely. There was no ties, there was no connection, no communication or anything. And I had reached out a few times over the course of the years to no avail. And I finally got myself in a position mentally where it was time and I was ready and I could give my daughter, the best version of myself. And I reached out, was told that she didn't want it, but it had to be done. So I went through the court system and got the opportunity to go face to face with her. And it was quite the experience. I mean, I really didn't know what to expect walking into it. I think my joke to break the ice was, because it was at a park at the river, you're allowed to stab me and throw me in the river. And her response being, I don't do that to family members, especially ones that I don't quite know.
Okay.
And, that kind of opened up the door. And from there, I kind of did a lot of reflecting on myself and the situation as it was unfolding, taking into account a lot of different Stoic teachings that I had learned along the way through philosophy, and applying them to the situation. The mother was combative. My daughter was kind of hesitant, maybe even unwilling. So I needed all that. I needed to face all of those things.
So let's go back a little bit. You said that you had to work on yourself before you were really ready. What did that look like for you?
Well, I've always suffered with depression and anxiety. And I've made a lot of wrong decisions based on that. You kind of find those filler moments that you throw yourself into because you think it's going to erase the problems. Meanwhile, you lose touch with the things that you value and that you should have in your life that you deserve. And when that last filler ended, I was alone, and I realized, hey, I'm not going to let these outside filler moments define who I am. I can reach in and I can construct myself in a way that I can live to my values and be able to speak for myself and use my own voice. And that's what I did. And as I gained momentum, then it was, now is the time. Now I'm ready to be able to show up and give the authentic version of myself.
Hmm. What was that first meeting like? What were you feeling inside before you saw her? And then once you saw her, what was that like?
I would say walking into the park felt like I can only imagine Davy Crockett felt at the Alamo. You know that you're going to die. However, the message that you're standing there fighting for is something you believe so deeply in that you're willing to give up whatever it takes.
Hmm.
And when I saw her walk over the hill was like one of those moments that play out in very slow motion
Hmm.
where you just realize that you've given a little girl something that she deserved to have. You changed the narrative of her life, but which is the most important aspect. But on the same point, you've given yourself back something.
Hmm.
And that was one of the most amazing feelings that is really difficult to put into words.
Yeah, I can imagine. What were some of the things that you prepared a joke, which is probably good for breaking the ice, but what were some of the other things that you think were helpful that day that you said or that you did that kind of eased the way for you to continue to pursue this relationship?
I would have to say that would be the fact that I provided a safe, authentic, stable situation environment for her to begin to feel things out and begin to get comfortable. I mean, even to this day, we're still you know in that awkward situations that
Hmm.
she's in her teenage years, and it's always difficult. But I when I committed to it, if I said I was going to be somewhere or do something,
Mm.
I've always seen it through. And that's something that is really a building block because it builds the trust factor and it kind of gives you an opportunity to start to engage and get to know each other.
What's the one thing that you walking into that situation that you wanted her to know about you in this process? Well, what did you want to impart to her about yourself that you felt like was important to be able to mend that relationship?
I would have to say that the biggest thing that I wanted her to know was that my absence was not her fault.
Hmm.
And when I told her that, it seemed like it lifted something off of her shoulders. And that really kind of set things in motion. And that came, within the first 2 hours of us seeing each other.
You said it's an ongoing process, and I'm sure it is. And running into the teenage years, that's it gets more weird as you go. I have grown children now, so I know what teenage years feel like being a parent. But what's it like now as she's a teenager? Are there new barriers, or are there just continued old ones? Like how's it working for you now?
There's still kind of that hesitancy, like we're this far down the road and we're kind of in a position where she's trying to define herself within, the structure of, my life and me within hers. And there's that hesitancy to have a lot of those hard conversations because at that age you're not exactly ready to understand or comprehend them. So we tend to steer away from those as much as possible. But there's become this understanding that based off the if I say I'm going to be there or you call on me, I'm going to be there, is built that kind of trust factor and freedom for her to be able to work herself in and weave into it that she's comfortable with, which obviously takes a lifetime to learn where you fit in, regardless of whether that parent was absent or not.
Right. How do you think empathy plays into this? Empathy on your side for her, empathy for you from her. How does empathy fall into this process?
I think the way that I viewed it was because it was me that took myself away from her, that took her father out. It's been my job and my place to carry the empathy and the understanding and give her that freedom, like when she, for example, is having a hard day or there's something comes up she doesn't want to talk to me about. Okay, I understand that.
Mm.
You know, it's not going to change anything as far as whether or not I stick around. And even if you do lash out with something that you might think is hurtful, it still don't change anything. It'll still be there. And those are kind of like the key points that you got to keep emphasizing over and over again. And I find it funny how like that little footprint of that phrase and that action tends to get laid down because obviously, as we're sitting here, Mother's Day was in the rearview mirror. And that was the weekend that she was with me, which was pretty awkward,
Mm.
given, the holiday. And there was total defiance about wanting to express to me what was going on. So I had to kind of problem solve it, figure it out. And I think through that, even though she was uncomfortable with the situation, being empathetic and being able to problem solve it really laid a positive footprint that down the road is going to germinate another branch in that relationship.
We will be right back with more of Mike's story after this. What is the status of your bucket list? Are you still wrapping your head around the purpose of having one? Are you struggling to write your list and don't know what to put on it? Or are you looking at your list wondering which item to cross off first? No matter where you are in your bucket list journey, I'm here to assist you in becoming the head crosser-offer of your list. To learn how to work with me as your bucket list coach, visit crossingitoffpodcast.com/coaching to find out all about the personalized and affordable coaching I offer to help you live out your list. Now back to the show. Yeah, I had a tenuous relationship with my father growing up. It wasn't an estrangement at all. We kept in contact and saw each other and did holidays and those kind of things, but we definitely had a tumultuous first 32 years of my existence. And for me, it was really, coming to a point in my life as an adult or emerging adult that I was never taught to have, as a child, was never taught to have empathy for my parents. I appreciate your vulnerability to say, hey, I caused this, or, I was the major factor in what's going on. But I think in the fixing process or the repair process, children of, adult children of parents have got to figure out, empathy and understanding that you've been through stuff. You were going through stuff. You talked about anxiety and depression. And I remember my dad not always being there emotionally for me. And he would sit in a recliner chair with his headphones on and listen to, 70s music, and which I've turned out to love, but I was always resentful that he, it's like, why can't you engage with me here? And I never until I was 32, 35 years old did I realize, wow, what a crappy life he had growing up, that, parents that were super, not nice, and that held him back from really being able to bond, right? The lack of that really didn't enable him. And so once I think I found empathy for that, I think that's when I was able to be able to do that, to be able to sit back and say, okay, these are the reasons why these things happened. And it's, he took responsibility for him, but it was definitely me not giving him any grace for being a human. It's like we're not taught as kids, we're taught to respect our parents, not to give them grace or to empathize with them.
See, and I think that's just something, as you just said, we're not taught that as children.
Hmm.
It's something that I'm not even sure can really be taught. It's more of an experience that you gain the knowledge based on, walking through the different stages or different chapters of life. Because, you know, um, one of the key aspects that made the, the distance, the absence so easy is the fact that I grew up in the same situation.
Hmm.
My father wasn't there. And it wasn't until I stopped and tried to walk through how I was going to approach my daughter and break that cycle
Hmm.
that I kind of formed a little bit of empathy for, the man out there that I don't know.
Hmm.
Just based on, I've heard stories. I met you for 20 minutes here, maybe 20 minutes there. And granted, I don't have a great picture.
Right.
I've got enough of the puzzle pieces to be like, okay, well, I understand you're going through this, going through that. So maybe if I faced you now, my thoughts or my interaction may be just a tad bit different, as opposed to 20 minutes before my grandmother's funeral,
Mm.
finding out not only about the funeral, but the fact that I was going to meet my father, showing up and being like, oh yeah, I'm an adult with kids of my own now. I mean, what's the point?
There's a lot to process for sure. I'm going to ask you a question. You can answer it. You don't answer it. I'll cut it out if you don't. But since you started this process, how has her mother's impression changed? Has she been more supportive, or is it still a work in progress with that as well?
See, that right there is kind of like the point that I find humorous out of it, and yet still kind of perplexing because we started this out. It was kind of like World War III.
Mm.
I literally felt like I was playing for a battle every time I had to interact. And by the time we went back to court for the finalized, everything, the judge listened to the story and kind of chuckled us out of the courtroom saying that we didn't need them
Hmm.
because we had formed this, working relationship. And a couple months back at the start of where I'm at now, she was texting me and goes, "Oh, by the way, we're friends now too." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So it's kind of funny how, you have a relationship with somebody and it tears apart. You end up willing or unwilling bitter enemies.
Yeah,
And then you come full circle and you're friends again.
that's good to hear. I'm glad that's been your experience. A lot of times people put items on their bucket list that are, joyful things, right? Not things that require you to buy a travel ticket, right? Airline ticket. And they're not necessarily things that, are hard, but they do bring joy. So my question to you is has this process brought you joy?
This process has brought me joy every single day since I started.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm definitely glad to hear that. What is if you had like one lesson you've learned or taught yourself, I guess, through this process that you would share with other people that are maybe going through the same situation, what would you tell them to help them make their situation better or be more successful?
I would have to say, considering my outlook and a lot of the things that I've been through, not just on this subject matter, but in life in general, all these bad things that happen to you, they're not unfortunate that they're happening.
Mm.
You're fortunate that they're happening to you because only you are going to be able to deal with them with the grace and the substance to get through the way that you do. And it'll also shape who you become.
Mm.
So everything that you face and that happens to you in the day, you need it. But with the catch to that being, you have to be a good steward of yourself. and not just take the stimuli and react within the
Mm.
moment. You got to calculate what you do. Think the plan through and how it relates to the long-term objective.
Yeah, we're always so quick to offense, I think, sometimes more than we need to be. And if we just stop and slow down, like you said, and think about, what's really going on here, how do I have to respond to it? How do I have to react to it? Then just automatically thinking the worst and being defensive. I think sometimes that's not the best route. What is something else on your bucket list, completely different than this, that you want to cross off?
Completely different than this. I think it's probably to live out some of these wild outdoor adventures that I
All right.
have.
All right, name them. What do you got?
Number one, to go out and have a successful stalk on a bear.
Okay. Have you never
I think that
you never done that before, or you've had unsuccessful stalks, or you just want one that's successful, or have you done it?
all right, let me rewind it and say, first of all, successfully draw a tag. I've never drawn a bear tag, so I've never had the actual opportunity.
Okay.
Just the whole thing in general would be, I feel, a great experience.
And is there something that's reason that it's a bear and not an elk, or something else? Is why a bear?
That's a funny story because a lot of my life shift and everything came around my second divorce.
Hmm.
And the joke that I developed was, you hit your midlife crisis. Well, my ex-wife hit hers and decided she was going to run off with somebody else. I hit mine and decided I wanted to go chase down a bear. Had the chance I had my face ripped off.
Yeah. Divorce and that probably feel a little bit of the same. So I understand that. Awesome. I hope you get that chance to do that. Mike, where can people find you online if they want to get more information? I know you've got a book that you're working on and have already some you've already published, but where can people find you?
Well, I'm the voice of the Project Mindfully Outdoors podcast. You can listen to that. It airs daily. You can find it on Spotify, Apple, and everywhere else, all the other podcast directories.
Can you
My
give us a
website,
can you give us a quick synopsis of the show and what it's about?
yeah, it's a couple days a week. I do basically a philosophy section where I tie outdoor skills into everyday life.
Okay.
So, say for example, how I talked earlier about stewardship,
Mm-hmm.
I tie the practice of land stewardship into the concept of self stewardship. And the
Nice.
example that I gave earlier about taking the stimuli and kind of holding it in your hand long enough to determine with an educated set of eyes whether or not it's going to play out and help your objective, as opposed to just acting and having to go back and say, for example, with the buffalo,
Mm.
how they were once abundant, and then we found out through the series of evolution that the more pieces that you put into work, the easier life gets, and they just hunted the buffalo in near extinction. They may have thought about it, they may not have. Point is, they still did it,
Yeah.
and now we're still recovering.
Right.
And you can apply that to your everyday life and the principle of it.
Yeah. That sounds like a great show. You said you have a website?
Yeah, the website is projectmindfullyoutdoors.wordpress.com, and then we're on Facebook and Instagram, Project Mindfully Outdoors, or you can look me up personally, Mike Martin.
All right. I will put all those in the show notes so that folks can click them and get to them right away. Mike, I really appreciate you coming on and being so vulnerable about this bucket list item. And I wish you all the success in furthering that relationship.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the time, the opportunity, and it's really a subject that needs to get out there.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for being here, Mike.
Thank you.
As a reminder to our listeners, in this episode's show notes, you will find links to learn more about this week's guest and information on how you can cross this item off of your list. You can follow my adventures of crossing items off my bucket list on Instagram and Facebook, and as always, new episodes of this podcast are available to stream every Friday morning. We will meet you here next week, and until then, keep living out your list.